The knock came just after 2 in the morning, sharp and uneven, rattling the thin pane of Merrick's ground floor window. He woke with a start, the remnants of a dream still fogging his mind, and for a moment he thought it was the wind. But then it came again, louder, desperate. When he pulled back the curtain, Adrian's face appeared, sweat-slicked, pale and wild-eyed. His younger brother had always been the charming one, the steady smile at weddings, the one their parents said had promise. Now he looked like a child who had seen the edge of the world. "Merrick," Adrian whispered, his voice cracking. "Please, open up." Merrick's stomach dropped. He pulled on a jumper, opened the window, and helped his brother climb through like they were boys again, sneaking out for cigarettes. Except this time, Adrian collapsed to the floor, trembling. "What happened?" Merrick asked. Adrian shook his head, unable to speak. His hands were scraped raw, his shirt stained with dirt, maybe blood. His eyes darted everywhere but Merrick's face. Finally, he choked the words out. "There was an accident on the road. I didn't stop." Merrick froze. The weight of those words filled the room like smoke. An hour later, they sat in their parents' kitchen. The clock on the wall clicked too loudly, every second like a hammer. Their mother's hands gripped a teacup, though she hadn't taken a sip. Their father's face was gray, lined with fear and something harsher, calculation. "It was a cyclist," their mother said, quickly, as they're rushing past the ugliest part. "Adrian didn't mean it. He panicked. But if the police come now, everything, his work, his future, his fiancée, it will all be ruined." Merrick felt his throat tighten. "What do you expect me to do?" His mother's eyes filled with tears. "You are strong, always strong. You've carried burdens before. Adrian, he wouldn't survive prison. You can. For the family, Merrick. Please." His father cleared his throat, voice low and steady. "We can arrange it. If you cooperate, if you confess, they will be lenient. It won't be forever." Merrick stared at them, stunned. His own parents asking him to lay down his life. Adrian sat hunched at the table, silent, unable to meet his gaze. It should have been he who spoke up, who confessed, who admitted his guilt. Instead, he said nothing. And Merrick, who had always been the quiet one, the dutiful son, found himself nodding. Just once, like a man lifting a wardrobe too heavy for one person because there was no one else to do it. By dawn, the police had a confession that wasn't his.
Processing took all day. Marek's name was spoken by strangers who did not look at his face. Doors shut behind him with a clack he felt in his teeth. He surrendered a belt, laces, a watch that had belonged to his father. They gave him a number and a folded sheet that listed rules, as if they were moral laws. No sudden movements, no trades, no noise after lights. His first cellmate, a quiet man named Pavel, taught him the rhythm in a tone that was neither kind nor cruel. "Keep your eyes level. Don't owe anyone tea," Pavel said, sitting on his bunk with hands like split firewood. "If you can work in the library, do it. Books make time behave." The library was a thin room with barred windows and a smell of paper and damp. Marek moved along shelves lined with worn spines, repairing cracked glue with tape the color of nicotine. Men came for crime novels and self-help manuals. They lowered their voices, as if a librarian might shush them, some remnant of childhood order tugging at their throats. He learned to make the days small, wake, check the corners for spiders, wash the metal cup, fold the blanket exact. He counted his steps to the workshop and back, and tried not to think about the kitchen table, where he had nodded once and changed everything. Letters arrived at first. His mother wrote about ordinary things, as if ordinariness could save them. The neighbor's dog had puppies. The lemon geranium survived the frost. Mass was crowded. "We are proud of your strength," she wrote, the words dense and tidy. His father's notes were shorter, often a sentence disguised as a paragraph. "We are managing. Trust in the process." Adrian wrote once 3 lines that smelled of apology without saying it.
Months folded into a shape he recognized too well. Then the letters slowed. Then, one winter, none came. On a morning so cold the metal bench burned through the cloth of his trousers, an officer called his name and mispronounced it. Mark. Office. Inside, a woman from administration sat with a file and a voice like a clean hallway. There was an illness, she said, eyes on the paper, not his face. Your mother passed in October. She waited with the stillness of people who have practiced this. Your father in January. Marek held the armrests as if the chair were a boat on a rough river. He had imagined goodbye 1,000 ways, and none included fluorescent light. He said thank you because he didn't know what else to say. On the walk back, he miscounted his steps and had to start again. In the chapel, whose walls were the color of aspirin, Father Tomasz offered him tea so sweet it felt medicinal. Do you want to talk? The priest asked, thumb bent from some old accident. Marek said no, and the priest nodded like that was a proper prayer. They sat. Steam rose. Silence managed to be a kind of company. Work, sleep, count, pray, read. He copied lines from a battered copy of The Plague and put them in his pocket like a cure. He learned not to flinch at shouts down the corridor. He learned which men wanted to talk and which wanted to be left unobserved. He learned that surviving is not the same as living, but it is the only bridge to it. On his last night inside, Pavel reached across the narrow aisle with a pack of instant coffee. For tomorrow, when the air feels too loud. What does it feel like? Marek asked. Pavel scratched his beard. Like the world forgot the rhythm you kept. The next morning, the gate opened with the same sound it always made. Outside, the sky looked too large. He stood with his returns, old clothes in a bag, a watch that ticked like a stranger, while traffic stitched the city together without him. The air was indeed too loud. He counted the seconds between tram bells and started walking. He did not have anyone to call. He had an address. He went to his brother.
Adrian lived on a cobbled street in Podgora, a short walk from Platz Bohaterov Geta, where the empty bronze chairs sat in rows like a silent audience. The building stairwell smelled faintly of cabbage and dust, a comfort he had not expected. He rang. Footsteps, a pause, the whisper of a chain sliding back. Adrian opened the door and stared as if he'd never learned the correct expression for this moment. He looked older, but not older enough. Shame had aged him in places grief did not reach. Marek, he said, and wrapped his arms around him, unsure where to put his hands, the way men are when history is present in the room like a third body. I can sleep anywhere, Marek said, to make it easier, gesturing at the bag as if it contained all that mattered. A woman appeared behind Adrian, slim, hair pinned with the precision of a person who likes things decided. Ilira, she said, offering a small nod rather than a hand. Her Polish had a clipped music to it, clean consonants, foreign vowels that had learned to live here. This is my brother, Adrian said, and to Marek he added quickly, my wife. Ilira's eyes moved the way a scanner moves over a barcode, fast, exact. She stepped back to let him enter. The apartment was tidy in a kind way. The air smelled of soup. On the floor, a small forest of colored blocks lay abandoned where someone had been building a house and then summoned away. From the bedroom came the soft, high murmur of a child. The sound made his heart seize and release. The spare room, Ilira said, leading him down the corridor. It was narrow but bright. A single bed, a small wardrobe, a shelf. On the mattress lay a folded towel and fresh sheets, aligned like squares on a chessboard. Bathroom is opposite, please. She shifted the towel a millimeter. We keep routines here. Thank you, Marek said. He He wanted to say more, but language felt like a set of dishes he did not want to break. Dinner was mushroom soup and bread served with practical efficiency. Elira and Adrian had the shape of a couple accustomed to doing many things without speaking. Sophia appeared in pajamas, hair braided in a dark rope down her back. She looked at Marek like children look at strangers they are told are family, cautious, curious, open to instruction from the adults' faces. "This is your Vuliak," Adrian said. "My brother." "Your brother who was away," Elira added, careful, each word placed like a cup on a shelf. "Hello," Sophia said. And then, with a wisdom he felt like a benediction, "Do you like stories?" "Very much," Marek said. "You can read me one," she decided, and looked at Elira for permission. "We'll ask Uncle to rest tonight," Elira said. "He has had a long day." After dinner, Marek offered to wash the dishes. Elira hesitated, then stepped aside. "We stack plates on the right, glasses upside down." He followed her instructions exactly. When he reached for the dish towels, she noticed his hands, nickstars, a thin, pale line along his thumb that had not existed before, and her mouth pressed into a line that was not judgment so much as caution. She called Sophia to brush her teeth and left the kitchen smelling of lemon and heat. Later, alone in the spare room, Marek sat on the bed and studied the seam where wall met ceiling. He could not find the shape of home in it. Still, he unfolded the towel, folded it back the way Elira had left it, and placed his bag under the bed. The sound of trams came through the window like a distant, reliable animal. He slept lightly. In the gray before morning, he woke to a whisper at the door. A small folded paper slid across the floor and stopped at his foot. When he opened it, he found 3 stick figures holding hands under a sun that had far too many rays. On each face, Sophia had drawn a different kind of smile.
Days arranged themselves. Marek rose early, made the bed so tight a coin would have bounced, and brewed coffee he did not drink just to smell it. He wiped the table without being asked. He learned the locations of things and put them back where he found them, as if the apartment were a museum exhibit and he an invisible guard. Elira's politeness had an edge. "We take shoes off at the door," she reminded him, even when he was barefoot. "Please use a coaster," she said, although he had. She thanked him for small tasks, but did not address him for anything larger than a request. He understood this as a kind of border control. He did not press it. At breakfast, he cut apples for Sophia in fan shapes that made her grin. "Again," she'd say, and he would, again. Elira watched and did not smile, but she did not intervene either. Afternoons, while Adrian was at work and Elira took on clients remotely, some kind of translation or bookkeeping, he gathered, Marek walked along the Vistula and counted bridges. He bought bread at the same bakery every other day until the woman behind the counter greeted him with the unquestioning cheer practiced by people who see the same faces. He did not go near his parents' old flat. Even the tram that branched toward Nova Huta made his stomach tighten in a way that was not hunger. Sophia slipped drawings under his door. Some had labels in block letters, Mama, Tata, Vuik. In one, he was taller than everyone and had a cape. In another, Elita's hair was a dark triangle that reached the page's edge. She was holding a flower. He wanted to ask why the flower had no stem, but decided the answer would be better if it arrived uninvited. At night, stories. The first evening he read from The Little Prince, careful with the cadence, and Sophia fell asleep on the 3rd chapter with one hand on the page as if to hold the fox in place. The second night, he told a story from memory about a boy who built a boat out of kindness and string. Elira listened from the hallway, and when it ended, switched off the light without a word. Tension lived in the small things. A plate placed too near the edge, a door not fully latched, a wet umbrella dripping onto the entry mat. Once, when Marek asked if he could shop for groceries, Iliada held up a list that had every item written in capitals and 3 lines under "No sweets." He brought home carrots and a fennel bulb he remembered his mother roasting. Iliada cooked it with salt and oil, and did not mention that he had almost chosen something her daughter wouldn't eat. One evening, as he reached for the dish rack, Iliada's voice came without looking at him. "We have had enough disruption," she said. "Sophia likes order. She needs it." "I know," he said. "What do you know?" she asked, like a test. "That children hold rooms together when adults can't," he said. She glanced at him then, quick, surprised to find an answer that wasn't a defense. Later, when Adrian came home and took off his coat with a tired movement, he found Marek kneeling by a fortress of blocks, listening seriously as Sophia explained the difference between a tower and a proper castle. Adrian smiled, guilt flickering under his face like a fish under water. He brought tea for Elira and tried to press his shoulder against hers as if to borrow warmth that she did not offer. "You are late," she said. "Tram," he said. Marek stacked another block. He did not look up. He was careful to be useful and invisible. He carried out rubbish, wiped spills before they became stains, fixed the loose screw on the door handle with a coin. He learned the rough map of Iliada's mind, what felt like intrusion, changing a radio station, what felt like help, tightening jar lids, what felt like danger, arriving late, speaking too gently as if everyone were breakable. One night, Sophia woke with a nightmare and refused to be soothed. "Monsters!" she cried, voice ragged. "There are none," Iliada said, brisk, firm with love. "We have checked." "There are none," Adrian echoed, searching under the bed with an exaggerated huff. Sophia kept crying. Not for monsters, Marek thought, but for the unnameable ache children get when air shifts. He sat in the doorway, not entering, and began to talk softly about a librarian who kept maps in his pockets. He described a map that showed where worries went when they left a room. He said they go to the balcony and watch the trams because worries like to count lights. Sophia hiccuped a laugh. Iliada looked over her shoulder with an expression that was not gratitude, but not contempt either. The crying stopped. Everyone slept. In the dark, Marek lay awake and counted the number of times the refrigerator cycled. He imagined leaving and pictured the way the front door would sound closing behind him, and imagined staying and pictured the same sound occurring inside him instead of in the room.
On a wet Thursday, he decided to go. The decision arrived without ceremony. He was drawing 4 small glasses when Elira made a remark so mild it should not have mattered. "Please don't stack the plates in that order." And something in him, brittle from holding, snapped with no noise. He nodded, set the towel down, and went to the spare room. He laid his bag on the bed and began to fold the life he had here into it. 2 shirts, socks, a paperback with the spine broken at page 143, a toothbrush. He moved as quietly as a thief because he did not want to wake any ghosts. There was money in his pocket from odd jobs and the paltry release allowance. He could find a hostel near the station that smelled of old wood and strangers. He could take a labor shift on a site, carry sacks upstairs until his legs stopped arguing. He could be a man in a city, which is a kind of freedom if you do not think too hard about it. He zipped the bag halfway and stood still. The apartment made its small night sounds. From the living room came Elira's keyboard taps, quick, precise. A tram slid past, whispering along its rails. Somewhere upstairs, a faucet coughed to life and coughed itself off again. His hand rested on the zipper. He thought of his mother's lemon geranium and wondered if it had survived 2 winters without her. He thought of his father's watch ticking on the dresser back in the old flat, marking seconds no one was there to collect. He thought most of all of Sophia's drawings, the suns with too many rays. Not wrong, he had realized, just sincere. A shadow filled the doorway. Sophia stood with her bare by one ear, curls frayed at the edges like a cloud that had been busy all day. She did not ask permission to enter.
She was a child. The house opened for her by reflex. "Are you going somewhere, Wujek?" she asked, whispering, because night had taught her how to be gentle with it. I put a hand on the bag to steady it. "I thought about visiting a friend," he said, and knew it was a lie because he had no friends, only the idea of places where he wasn't. She stepped forward until her toes touched his shoe. "Papa laughs more when you read," she said simply, as if submitting evidence to a court, "and Mama's mouth is less like this." She pushed her lips into a tight line in uncanny imitation and then relaxed them. "It goes softer." Mark exhaled. The room tilted, not the floor, but the meaning of it. He sat on the edge of the bed and tapped the spot next to him. Sophia climbed up, Bear first, Self second. "Do you like the castle I built?" she asked, already knowing he did. "I like that it has a door that opens both ways," he said. "That's rare. Most people build only one direction." She nodded with the seriousness that had rescued him more than once. "Mama says doors should be locked at night, but in stories, doors have magic." "Your mother is not wrong," he said. "Stories aren't either." They sat a while, the bear between them like a negotiator. She leaned into his side the way children do when they decide someone is a pillar. He realized he had not been leaned against in years. It hurt and healed at the same time, like blood returning to a sleeping limb. From the hallway, Elira's steps approached, paused, retreated. She was giving them privacy or giving herself time. It was hard to tell which, and maybe both were true. "Will you read me the map story? The one where worries go watch the trams?" He reached for the paperback and then for his own voice, softer than the paper. He told the story again, adding a new detail. Worries took notes on the lights, because counting and writing calmed them, and sometimes they forgot why they were worried at all. Sophia laughed at the exact place she had the night before, then yawned, which is laughter turning toward sleep. When she nodded off, he carried her to bed. Elira stood in the doorway of Sophia's room, arms crossed not as a barrier but as if holding herself together, which is different. She watched his hands arrange the blanket like a map. "You were packing," she said, a statement. "I thought about it," he answered. She studied his face for a long breath. "Do you intend to disappear the way people do when it's easier for everyone to pretend they never arrived?" He looked at the child, at the slow tide of her breathing. "I intend," he said carefully, "not to make things worse." "That is different from making them better," she replied. "I don't know how to do that part," he said. Elira's posture changed by a degree you could measure only if you had been watching her for days. "Then don't leave in the middle of the night," she said, voice low. "We have a child who believes in mornings." He nodded. It felt like being issued a rule that was also a mercy. Back in the spare room, he slid the bag under the bed again. The zipper whispered closed like a secret being put away. He sat on the mattress and waited for regret to arrive. It didn't. In its place was a tired kind of relief and the outline of a plan that was not a plan at all. Stay for now, read at night, be useful and quiet. Let time do some work no one else could do. From the living room, Adrian's voice rose, tender and uncertain. "Thank you," he said. And Mark could not tell whether he meant the repaired faucet, the calm child, the decision not to vanish, or all the unpaid debts at once. Mark turned off the lamp. The dark was kind rather than empty. He lay down and listened to the apartment breathe. The hallway light clicked. The city kept moving. In the space between the sounds, he found a thought that was almost a prayer. Stay for the girl who draws suns as if someone might need extra light. He slept.
The days after Merrick nearly left evaporated into a strange routine. Elira's instructions, "Don't put your shoes there," "Sophia doesn't need sugar," "Wipe the table with the grain," wore on him like coarse fabric. Adrian, burdened by his secret, tiptoed between his wife's sharpness and his brother's silence. Merrick felt himself shrinking inside a home that was not his. He began staying out late,
lingering at bus stops and wandering industrial backstreets where rusted fences sagged under the weight of forgotten years. One afternoon, a faded sign caught his eye, Auto Naprava, auto repair, hanging crooked over a cinder-block building with broken windows. The place was abandoned, weeds pushed through cracks in the concrete, and the roll-up door was padlocked with a chain that yielded to a screwdriver and patience. Inside, dust motes danced in shafts of light, and the smell of old oil and cold metal hit him like a memory of simpler work. Marek had always loved engines. As a boy, he'd helped his father fix his Fiat's carburetor in a cramped garage. In prison, he'd spent long hours maintaining laundry machines and generators, learning to coax life out of stubborn mechanisms. This derelict workshop felt like a second chance. He visited daily. He swept, passed holes in the roof with tar paper, and slowly brought in borrowed tools. First a socket set from a neighbor who remembered his parents, then a jack from a scrap dealer who shrugged at Marek's past. He exchanged favors, fixing a moped in return for an old compressor, tuning a taxi driver's engine for a set of fluorescent lights. Word spread quietly through back alleys and market stalls. There was a man down by the abandoned garage who could make dead cars breathe again for fair pay. Nights at Adrian's apartment grew fewer. Elera's sighs at the door when he came home late sharpened into pointed remarks about hygiene and Sophia's routines. "We have rules here," she said one evening as he wiped grease from his hands and reached for a glass. "We cannot have oil on the sink, noise at midnight, strangers calling at all hours." Marek looked at his brother, who avoided his eyes. He thought of the dark, quiet garage and the smell of engine oil that didn't judge him. "Maybe I'll sleep there tonight," he said, and did. In the morning, he paid a week's deposit on the lease to the landlord, who hadn't bothered to hang a for rent sign because he'd given up on the place. It wasn't much. One large room with a pit, a rusty sink, and a small office with a window that rattled in the wind, but it was his.
Marek's absence from Adrian's home relieved one pressure and created another. Elira's nagging faded to occasional admonishments delivered by phone. "Sophia misses you," she said once, reluctantly, but she no longer had reason to correct his posture or his placement of spoons. Adrian felt the void at dinner. The seat at the table stayed empty, a silent accusation. Marek, meanwhile, slept on a cot in the garage office among the smell of metal and the hum of the nearby railway line. He kept a radio tuned to late-night jazz and found comfort in the predictable logic of carburetors and gearboxes. He ate soup from a thermos and wiped his hands on rags stiff with grease. He left his brother's house each day with fewer apologies, more wrenches. Despite the distance, Sophia appeared. One afternoon, he heard small feet on the concrete and looked up to see her in the doorway, hand in Elira's. "Uncle, you have a new house," she exclaimed, eyes wide as she took in the rows of tires and oily parts. Elira lingered at the threshold, arms crossed, discomfort clear. "It's a workshop," Marek corrected gently, "for fixing cars." He knelt and showed Sophia how a spark plug fired, how a timing belt held things together. Her giggle echoed off the bare walls. Elira's tone softened for a moment. "Are these safe?" she asked, nodding at the tools. There was more curiosity than contempt. Marek offered her a pair of gloves and let her feel the weight of a torque wrench. "Everything has its use," he said. She watched him work, eyes narrowing when she saw how easily he navigated this world. It unsettled her sense of superiority. One evening, Adrian stopped by after work, hands thrust deep in his pockets. He watched his brother remove a cylinder head with quiet concentration. "You're good at this," he admitted. Marek did not look up. "I had time to learn." His words were flat, but a crack of something sharper flickered beneath. Adrian shuffled his feet. "You shouldn't be sleeping here alone. Come home some nights. Sophia asks." Marek wiped grease from his fingers. "It's easier here," he said. He did not add, "easier to breathe without rules measured by another woman's fear." Sophia's visits became routine. On Saturdays, she rode her small bicycle along the cracked pavement while Marek changed oil and tightened bolts. She arranged nuts and bolts by size, her tongue peeking out as she concentrated. In this unofficial apprenticeship, Marek found a sweetness he had missed. A child's unfiltered questions, her pride when she could identify a ratchet from a wrench. Alira still bristled at the grease under Sophia's nails. "She shouldn't be around this," she protested to Adrian one evening. "It's dirty. It's not proper." Adrian looked at his wife with exhaustion. "She loves it. It's the only time Merrick poks." He paused. "It's the only time I see him almost happy." In the garage, happiness was a small, practical thing. A carburetor adjusted just right. A taxi driver paying him with a warm loaf of bread. Sophia laughing as she revved an engine under his supervision. The isolation felt less like punishment and more like choice. Sometimes, after closing, Merrick sat on the concrete step outside, grease embedded in his nails, and read letters he found in a shoebox his mother had left for him. The letters had been written while he was inside, never mailed. "We thought we were protecting our family. We see now we asked too much of you. One day, forgive." He tucked the paper back, listening to distant trains, the hum of his own heart.
The lie Adrian had lived with did not dissolve with Marek's departure. It pressed harder. One evening, he showed up at the garage pale, eyes rimmed red. Engines lined the walls, silent witnesses. "I told Alira," Adrian blurted without preamble. "I told her the truth." Marek set down his wrench and wiped his hands. "How did she take it?" he asked, though he could guess. "She's furious," Adrian whispered. "At me, at you, at our parents, at herself, I think. She took Sophia and went to her mother's for a few days." He rubbed his face. "I didn't know where else to go." Marek leaned against the workbench. He remembered being 14, hearing adult voices decide his future. He remembered a cell door closing. He remembered Alira's cold eyes across a dinner table. He did not know if there was room for sympathy in the cluttered workshop, but he gestured for Adrian to sit on an overturned crate. "What did he say?" Marek asked. "Everything," Adrian breathed. "That it was me, that you went away so I could finish school, marry, have a life. That our parents persuaded you, that I let you suffer." His voice broke. "She kept asking why. I had no answer that makes sense." Marek handed him a cup of tea from the kettle on the hot plate. "Sometimes there is no answer. Not a good one." He wanted to be harsher. 15 years had carved that desire into him. But he looked at the man who had once been his little brother and saw someone frayed, not by prison walls, but by guilt. "I'm sorry," Adrian said, again, uselessly. "I know," Marek replied. "You've said it, but you'll have to do more than say it." He gestured around the workshop. "Fix what you broke, not just with words." Adrian nodded, the enormity of that task settling on his shoulders.
The confession cracked open the family's silence. Alira returned from her mother's, still angry, but with fewer walls. She insisted Sophia wear gloves at the workshop and set a curfew for visits. She still bristled, but she no longer referred to Merrick as him when she spoke about him. Once, she even stayed for tea, listening as Merrick explained how a starter motor worked. She did not smile, but she nodded. Merrick's business grew. A delivery company brought 3 vans for service. A school teacher recommended him to colleagues. A retired mechanic offered old tools in exchange for help installing a new radiator in his apartment. Merrick hired an assistant, Piotr, who had been in prison for a minor theft and found doors closed everywhere else. In giving Piotr work, Merrick felt he was turning the pain of his past into something useful. On weekends, Sophia came with homework and questions. She drew him pictures of cars with wings, engines with hearts. One drawing showed 4 people, Papa, Mama, Uncle, and Sophia, standing in front of the garage, smiling under a sun that had exactly the right number of rays. Merrick pinned it above his workbench. He did not move back into Adrian's apartment. He went for dinner sometimes, bringing bread from the bakery and apples from the market. He sat at the table as a guest, not a resident. He made sure not to overstay. Boundaries kept everyone's peace. When the anniversary of his mother's death came, he lit a candle in the workshop and let the wax drip onto a jar lid. He stood with Adrian and Sophia and Alira in the dim light and said a prayer that was as much for himself as for his mother. Alira stood beside him, hands folded, face solemn. She did not reach for him, but she did not flinch when Sophia took both their hands and held on. Merrick still carried the weight of lost years,
But in the hum of engines, the grease under his nails, and the laughter of a child who believed in his future, he found a rhythm that was his own. Leaving his brother's house had been an act of self-preservation. Building a workshop from an abandoned garage became an act of self-definition. Adrian repaired his own mistakes slowly, with actions instead of apologies. He came to the garage not to oversee but to learn, handing tools and changing oil under Marek's supervision. Each small act was a switch in a hallway darkened by years. Together they turned them on, one by one.